Good morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you may find yourself. And welcome to Beyond the Bins, a podcast that explores the various ways that we, the human species, are navigating a rapidly changing world as it relates to the environment, sustainability, conservation, ecology, and more. My name is Laurel. Here, we'll share stories, ideas, and pose questions about modern man's relationship with the natural world and where to go from here.
Hello. It is Wednesday, August 6th, 2025, and welcome to the very first video episode of Beyond the Bins. I'm just going for a little walk at a local park while I record this. We're also going to be, not completely unscripted. I have a little outline of things I want to say, but we're going to be, more or less unscripted today. So we'll see how this goes. So the other day, I was wanting to go for a bike ride, or was thinking about going for a bike ride. It was in the evening and it was the following day. I was thinking I might want to get up and go for a bike ride. And I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to do that because there's been a lot of little wildfires here in southwestern Colorado, and there's been some issues with air quality, and I wasn't sure if it was going to be safe to be outside for doing exercise for that long of a period of time. And so thankfully I was able to get one in, but so I'm 37 years old. I was born in 1988, and I grew up in Chicago, but I've lived in Colorado for about 10 years, and a lot of my childhood summers, my family would travel west, especially to Colorado, quite frequently. And I remember, we'd be high up in the mountains, and my dad would remark about how, this was some of the freshest air you were ever going to breathe. And it does seem like, and while I didn't grow up in the West, it does seem like, dealing with wildfires and smoke from wildfires is something that I don't really remember, having, witnessing a whole lot of, in my travels out to this region in my youth. So I sort of started thinking about stories and what kinds of stories are being told, what kinds of stories need to be told, and that sort of thing. Another story from my parents that comes to mind is so my mom, she also grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. She grew up in the 50s and early 60s, and she said that when she was a kid that there was a skating pond in the winter where you could go and ice skate on. And back when she was a kid, you could pretty much always rely on that pond being frozen. Even when I was growing up, by the time I was growing up in the 90s, it did seem like, that kind of cold winter weather, conducive to outdoor ice skating, wasn't something that was always so reliable. Another story that I've heard that I'm thinking of is, someone who grew up here in a small town in southwestern Colorado, who went to high school in the 80s, said that it was not unheard of for people to snowmobile to school. It doesn't seem like it snows quite enough nowadays for that to happen, or at least when it does snow that much, schools just close down. I don't know. So now I just want to say I am not the first person to kind of had this idea, but I sort of started thinking, like, I feel like these are the kinds of stories that need to be told. And I know that people are trying to tell stories like these. I'll link some resources about this kind of storytelling in the description. But I feel like these kinds of stories are the ones that need to be told. These kinds of personal stories about, how things used to be different and how they're changing are the kinds of stories that need telling. And before I go further, I do want to say, there have been just, some positive changes that have happened in my lifetime too. So take the bald eagle, for instance. I know that it was once an endangered species. It was one of the many bird species that was affected by DDT back in the early to mid 20th century. I know that the bald eagle was removed from the endangered species list